Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the tuning and modification options for WRX CVTs. So if you have a Subaru WRX that's a CVT, I'm sitting in front of my 2016 manual, but I owned a WRX CVT for a long time, and if you follow the channel, you know that I've made a lot of content about it. But regardless, I'm going to talk to you about what tuners will tune these cars, what modifications you can put on them, who makes what, all those good things. And throughout this video, I'm going to disperse some awesome WRX CVTs and a few not that have been fully modified, tuned. And I want to give some recognition to those guys out there that have WRX CVTs that have really done a lot to their cars. And their Instagram stuff will be in the description below, so go follow them. This video is gonna have tons of information and gonna break it X, Y, and Z down for tuning these cars. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the tuners that will tune WRX CVTs. And I say WRX CVTs, but it's a WRX with a CVT transmission, but I'm gonna continue to refer to them as WRX CVTs in this video because I'm lazy, and that's typically what you hear people say. I'm gonna go through the most common tuners. I'm just going to my notes here just so I can list through them. We're gonna talk about common tuners and whether they offer a tune. We're gonna start with Cobb tuning. So I don't even need to look at my notes for a second. Cobb tuning. So Cobb tuning is the bread and butter of what you think about when you think about Subaru tuning. Cobb makes the access port, which is something you need to have for most tuning solutions for your WRX, your Subaru, and a bunch of other cars, brands of cars out there. So Cobb is the first thing I think of when I think of tuning, when WRXs, which is great for their branding, but it's also very important for our cars. And they are like the person to go to for off-the-shelf solutions. MA Performance also makes great ones, but Cobb OTS maps are very common, and a lot of you guys run them. Cobb, the access port, if you put it on your WRX CVT, this is a manual, I've got an access port in this car, but if you put it in your WRX CVT, they only offer a stage 1, a stage 1 plus off-the-shelf tune for your WRX CVT. They do not intend on making a stage 2. They're firm believers of, if you've seen my other video, I don't know if I've posted it yet or if this is going first, but if you've seen my other video, or if you're gonna see my other video, 300 to 330 wheel horsepower and a max of 330 pound-feet of torque. That's typically what people are saying you can run up into before you're really rolling the dice, and even then you're risking it. There are cars that make more power and more torque than that, but they're rolling the dice on their transmissions. So Cobb will do a stage 1 plus off-the-shelf tune. It's a great tune. You can get the access port, you can download the off-the-shelf tune, you can run that tune. It'll solve a whole lot of other problems with your car, but you can run that tune until you set up your Pro Tune with one of the following dealers. So I've never understood how to pronounce this just because I've never been there, but Fat Body, I think that's how you say it. Tuning is a no-go. They won't tune these cars. It's a very common Subaru WRX tuner. They will not tune them. So Clark Turner Tuning, which is someone else, and I'll throw a picture up now, but Clark Turner Tuning is somebody else that tunes WRXs. It looks like they will tune WRX CVTs, decent reviews through them. It's just one of those names that I've heard people going to. I don't know much about them personally, but they'll put a WRX CVT on a dyno tuner. Ambit tuning will also tune WRXs. Torqued Performance will also do the WRX CVTs. Ren Tuning will also do WRX CVTs. That's pretty much it for my list of tuners. Those are the tuners that I think of most when I think of dyno tuning for Subaru WRXs, and I think that they probably do the majority of WRX tuning for our country, for the United States. And I do want to preface that all those guys, they're not going to let you run massive numbers, and if they do, they're going to make sure you understand that if you run over 300 wheel horsepower or 330 pound-feet of torque, you're really risking your transmission. That being said, those are the guys that you can at least start the conversations with I want to tune my WRX that has a CVT transmission. What are the next steps? What can I do to my car? What have you seen? Because it's really important. You're gonna watch my video, and my video is gonna have a ton of information for you guys, but you might have a specific tuner that knows your climate really well, that's seen a lot of anecdotal stuff, that understands how cars might be driven in Pittsburgh versus Boston versus LA, that has some good information, and they might have better access to certain parts, they might have better relationships with certain companies. Getting information from your Pro Tuner and finding a Pro Tuner you're comfortable with is really important when you're gonna go take your WRX CVT in, or your other WRX, or whatever you're doing. So I hope you reach out to one of those companies if you're considering even buying a WRX CVT. Understand what you can make power-wise, understanding how much it's gonna cost. I think most of the time, all told, to get to a stage 2 on a WRX, just generally on a WRX, with all the preventative maintenance, all the regular maintenance, all the parts, the tune, the install, probably looking, if you buy your parts new, all your stuff new, you're probably looking in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. So it's a lot of money. I mean, the tune alone is gonna be like $500, $550. You know, you get your spark plugs, you got all your fluids, round that up to another $400, $500. you know, to do all your testing and stuff. So $1,000 all in for the dyno tune. If you're being safe, you can be a little riskier if you want. But like then you're doing a J-pipe, a full exhaust. That alone, if you buy that new, is like $1,400. You get an intake and then the $400 if you buy it new. Your access port could be $600 if you buy it new. All these things add up. I'm assuming you're installing everything else on your own. If you're not, it's $100 an hour to get that stuff installed at a shop, maybe a little bit more depending on where you live. So it's real money invested. So enough with the tuners. You guys know who to go to now. Let's talk about essential parts. So again, if you're gonna tune it, an exhaust, a J-pipe, an intake are all things you need to do. Specifically to WRX CVTs, there are two big modifications that people are gonna talk about when you're talking about tuning WRX CVTs, and it's going to be torque converters, upgrading your torque converter, and transmission coolers. So we're gonna start with transmission coolers. My favorite transmission cooler for WRX CVTs, and the thing that I've seen the best success, is the Mishimoto transmission cooler for the WRX CVT. And essentially what it's doing is it's keeping the transmission cooler and preventing component failure. You don't really see this in spikes of use, but over long-term usage, you know, if you're driving on the highway for 30 minutes, it's gonna keep your transmission cooler for that 30 minutes because you're using the engine longer. If you use this car, or if you use your WRX CVT to gun it a bunch, it's not gonna help you in that short-term event where you have the spike of power or torque. It might bring the temperature down just a little bit, but it's really to protect you over the long period of time of higher horsepower and higher torque usage. So going with a Mishimoto transmission cooler is definitely something to use if you're gonna drive your WRX a lot. Even if you're not tuned, it's something to consider, but it's definitely something to consider if you're just pushing higher numbers on the car. Overall, it should help keep catastrophic failure from happening. So the other thing is a torque converter. Now a torque converter is a much more expensive, or can be much more expensive of a journey, because the trans cooler, you can do it yourself if you wanted to. The torque converter is much harder to do yourself, in my opinion. It might differ for all you guys, but it's something that you need to consider having it done at a shop, and the parts alone are gonna be more expensive. A torque converter is a mixed bag. There are mixed opinions on what it actually does for your car. And because there aren't enough WRX CVTs, not enough of us are tuning them, and not enough of those tuned WRX CVTs have torque converters, we don't really have definitive knowledge of what it's doing. But it's replacing the existing torque converter. It's got a higher torque capacity and power capacity, but then that power is then translated into the CVT internals. So there's a whole question of, is it even effective? Do you then have a lower threshold from the CVT where you'd rather put all the pressure on the torque converter that's existing? Those are all questions that you can kind of play in your mind and understand and try to learn. But for the most part, because we don't know, improving your torque converter is improving a major portion of your CVT transmission when you're thinking about power translation and torque translation. So it's definitely a step in the right direction if you're reaching for higher power. And if you look at the cars that do make more power, the WRX CVTs that have made higher powers and they're holding them for long periods of mileage, they do also have torque converters that are upgraded. So it's something to consider, even if you're just looking at those 3 or 4 cars that have made really good power. That might be anecdotal, but again, it's something to consider when you're thinking about it. So let me go to my handy dandy notes for a second. The number one torque converter that I knew about when I was driving my WRX CVT was the F1 Motorsports CVT Trans Torque Converter. And I'm just looking at the power. So it's rated at 600 horsepower, and it's a direct bolt-on. And that's what I heard most when I was driving my WRX CVT. Now, I sold my WRX CVT about a year ago. You should look at the channel. There's a video. I think it's about a year ago. Oh, no. Okay, so it was a year ago in like 10 days. I think that's when I sold it. Again, the F1 torque converter, the F1 Motorsports torque converter was what everyone was talking about and had relatively good reviews, up to 600 horsepower. On paper did exactly what it's supposed to do. And it might do it. I'm not trying to tell you it doesn't, but it's a very expensive piece of equipment. I wrote it down, $3,000 for the part. That's expensive. $3,000 for the part. It is, talk about all the other tuning expenses that I said, $3,000 to $4,000, add $3,000 onto that. And maybe another $700 for the transmission cooler, right? You're looking at another $4,000 not paying someone to install it on your car. Now, the one that's come up recently, or maybe it's not recently, but I have started to see it more. Maybe that's the way to say it. I've started to see it more, is the level 10 bulletproof WRX torque converter. And it's good up to 700 horsepower versus the 600. You're not going to make either on the car. But that's only $800 to $1,000 depending on where you buy it, who you buy it, and when you buy it from level 10, the company. So less money. Both are going to be fairly dedicated installs. You need a lift, you need to be under the car, you need certain tools. I do recommend having a shop do it so they're liable for anything that breaks. Hey guys, so that's pretty much all the information you need to know. I'd watch my pre-dyno tuning checklist so you can understand the other things you need to do prior to doing your dyno tuning and your tuning, just so you can understand the full process. And if you have any questions about the video, drop it in the comment section below. If you want to know more about tuning, Subaru's, automotive performance, all that kind of stuff, I do recommend subscribing to the channel. You don't have to though. And if you stuck through the video this far, I do appreciate you watching, and thank you, and have a great day. And good luck with your WRX CVTs and your transmissions. I hope all of you guys get long lives out of your transmissions and that you never have issues.